I sat in bed once again, reading. That's pretty much all I came here to do. I'm not interested in partying, or hanging out with friends. I'm here to escape my life for a week, and hopefully clear my head in the process. Iwaizumi entered the room a few minutes later and plopped himself on his bed. He looked as if he was trying to fall asleep. 3 hours passed and here I was still reading. Iwaizumi had just woken up from his nap. I occasionally glanced at him while he was asleep. I know it's a little weird, but I find something about him so charming, you know, besides his face. He propped his head up and looked over to me. I looked back at him, curious. He just smiled. You sure love your books, he said in a mocking tone. Reading, it's an escape, I reply, quietly. He sat there, silent for a while. How many did you bring? He asks, sitting up on the edge of his bed. I waited a moment before speaking, making sure my count was correct. 7. Mind if I read one? He asks, with his voice growing husky. I smiled, then pulled a book from my bag that sat on the floor next to my bed. Here. I hand him a book, something that he might be interested in, still with a smile on my face. We spent the afternoon doing nothing in the cabin. Mostly sleeping and reading. I was pleased though. This was all I could have hoped for. Finally being able to converse with someone genuine after all this time lifted my soul a bit. Iwaizumi took a shower. I decided to do the same, only, I realized I forgot my towel. Is something wrong? Iwaizumi asked, noticing me digging through my bag. I think I forgot my towel, I reply, not removing my eyes from the bag. Don't worry, I'm sure they have extra here. Just ask one of the teachers, he assured me. He's right, there's no need to worry about it. I turned to thank him, but instead froze as I caught sight of Iwaizumi, shirtless. I could feel myself practically turning red. I wanted to hide it without being obvious but couldn't think of any way to do so. I sat there, clearly blushing, not knowing what to do. Iwaizumi looked at me curious. What, does my being shirtless make you uncomfortable? He asked, drying himself off. No. I'm just not used to it is all. I barely managed to speak. He walked over to his bed and searched his bag for a shirt. Wanna head out for dinner? We can ask a teacher there, he asks, still rummaging through his belongings. Yeah, sure, I reply with a little more enthusiasm than usual. The fact that he asked if I wanted to come with him made me happy. He could just ignore me like everyone else does and do his own thing, but instead he's been including me. That could be the reason I find him charming. He's like the only ray of light shining in my dark world right now. After he put on a shirt he headed for the door. I walked closely behind him. When we got outside the atmosphere hit. The dark night sky, the breeze ruffling the leaves on the trees, and the crickets' chirps echoing across the park. It's so peaceful out here, I state, in awe. Yeah. When I came on the trip I didn't expect things to be this relaxing. He turned to me with a cute smile. My heart almost beat through my chest. As we walked to the park's kitchen, or dining hall rather, I calmed myself. I knew it wasn't possible for anything to happen between us. Still, I'd still like to be friends at least. Though that might be expecting too much. Things never work out the way I want them to, or need them to. We entered the kitchen to see everyone already eating. I was a little worried that everyone may have picked through the food. We made our way through the room and got up to the food displays. There was still some to take from, but it looked like the main dish was already wiped clean. Iwaizumi grabbed us 2 trays and handed one to me. I let out a shy smile and thanked him. I ended up with a whole lot of veggies on my plate. Potatoes, spinach, carrots, broccoli and some other weird-looking stuff I had no idea about. I did have some chicken and rice piled on though. When Iwaizumi was in the process of making a plate an instructor walked by. I decided now would be a good time to ask for towels. Excuse me. Are there any spare towels anywhere? I question as I walk up to the middle-aged woman. Well, if it isn't the Cuddle Buddies. She spoke in a joking manner. I felt my face heat up. What does she mean by Cuddle Buddies? By this time Iwaizumi was already at my side ready to eat. I glanced at him a second, spotting a smile on his face. It seems he understood what she meant. Sorry kid, Maki and Matson used the last of the towels for a bonfire last night. She sighed. What the heck? Before I could even question her about it she replied. Don't ask. I could look for spares around camp if you want. She said, grabbing hold of her hip with one of her hands. I guess I'm not the only one who finds this like a camp. We sat there in silence, trying to figure out what to do for a moment. You could borrow one of mine. Iwaizumi spoke hesitantly. I wasn't sure if he was actually offering or if he felt like he had to. I can't. I mean. I decline, feeling like it's my only option. It's alright, I have a couple spares. Duh. Only if you're really okay with it. I reply, looking to the ground. Like I said, it's alright. He confirmed, bopping me in the head with his tray of food. I gave him a little smile. There, problem settled. More towels should be arriving in a few days if you still need them by then. She announced before disappearing somewhere in the building. I looked up at Iwaizumi, with a burning question still in mind. What did she mean by cuddle buddies? I asked shy and quiet as we head to an empty table. Well, yesterday when you fell asleep, you kind of closed the distance between us. He said nonchalantly. I mentally gasped. I know I used to be clingy, but I didn't think it would still be so extreme. I'm sorry. I apologize, looking down at my tray. This is so embarrassing. I can be sorta clingy, I guess. It's fine. I fell asleep soon after anyway. He said, taking a seat and me doing the same. Did I really spend the night cuddled against him? We ate mostly in silence as my mind ran through the embarrassing thoughts. Iwaizumi finished eating a while before me but he was kind enough to wait until I finished mine. We turned our dishes in and headed back to the cabin. I placed a change of clothes in the bathroom. Iwaizumi saw that I was going to shower so he dug through his bag and got out one of his towels. He exited the room and came up to me in the hall to hand me the towel. That moment, he looked breathtaking with his towering, although he is shorter than me by a bit, frame and handsome face. I froze a moment before accepting the towel from his hands. He must think I'm weird. I shyly look up at him, trying to hide my reddened face. Thank you. I breathed out before heading to the bathroom. I washed the day away then carefully dried myself with Iwaizumi's towel. Laundry day should be tomorrow or the day after so he won't have to wait long for me to return it. As I entered the room I noticed Iwaizumi laying on his bed probably listening to music. When Iwaizumi heard my entrance he turned to face me. Are you going on that hike tomorrow? He asked, elevating himself. I'm thinking about it. I answer quietly. I'm still debating whether or not going is a good idea. It might be just what I need. I like plants and nature or whatever, so it could be relaxing. I would actually like to go with him. I think it could be fun, as long as we keep some distance between us and the other students. I crawled into bed, ready to fall asleep. Iwaizumi shut off the lights and returned to his bed. This is my first night sleeping in this bed. I hope I'm able to avoid my usual night terrors, now that I'm in a new location. I didn't wake up in a panic yesterday when I slept outside, so hopefully things continue to go that way. I slowly drifted off to sleep with varying thoughts running through my mind. Things seemed to be getting better for me now that I'm away from home, if I can even call it that. I haven't felt the need to cut yet either, so that's a plus. Just when I thought things would go well I woke up screaming into the night, covered in sweat with my hands trembling uncontrollably. I don't even remember having any nightmares so it was unexpected. Iwaizumi woke up to the startling sound. Is something wrong? He mumbled in a sleepy voice. I tried speaking, but nothing would come out. I was still too shaken to respond. Iwaizumi sat there watching me until I had control of myself. I shifted myself to the edge of my bed, mimicking Iwaizumi's position. Sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. I apologize, looking down to my feet. What happened? Are you all right? He questioned, still sounding a little tired. I've been very closed off from him, not wanting to mention my past. He's been nothing but kind to me, so I could at least answer his questions honestly. I'm fine. It's just, I often get night terrors. I admit, with my sights still set on my feet. I should have told you beforehand, sorry. Duh. Do you have any way to deal with them, or do you just accept them? He asked with a fist under his chin. I usually just let them happen. I speak quietly, almost whispering. When I was younger, my mum used to stay with me until I fell asleep. Every time I would sleep like a log. I guess having someone I can trust near me puts my mind at ease. I don't really know. I remembered that I always enjoyed being around people. I'd feel lonely and uneasy otherwise. We sat in silence a while before either of us spoke. I have a suggestion. It's a long shot, but it might work. I prop my head up to him and wait for him to speak further. Why don't you sleep next to me? He says, patting the bed beside him. I couldn't tell if he was teasing me or if he actually meant it. Are you sure? I asked cautiously, checking his facial expression. He seemed serious enough. I mean, only if you want to. He shrugs before getting back in bed. I would have decided against it if it was anyone besides him. He's kind and thoughtful, totally different than how I see him at school. That had me a little worried though. Why would he act this way towards me when he's usually the opposite to others? With that in mind, I still decided to trust him. I stood from my bed, taking my pillow with me, and hesitantly trotted over to his. I still felt shaky from earlier but managed to support myself. I'll try it. I speak in a hushed, shy voice. He lifted his cover with one arm, making an entrance for me. I crawled in beside him and relaxed into my pillow while curling up a little. I made sure to keep a body of space between us so that he wouldn't feel uncomfortable. I know it was hard for him to even suggest such an idea. I never imagined sleeping in bed with such a handsome guy. It didn't seem realistic, yet here I am. I was very uneasy at first, but as time passed and our body heat mixed, I began relaxing. Soon it was one of the best feelings in the world. I knew I would be okay sleeping this time. I was out like a light. Sometime during the night, when I didn't think I could be more comfortable, I repositioned myself and found a spot even more serene. I shut off the light and hopped into bed. I was lying awake for some time before drifting off to sleep. About an hour in, I woke to the sound of screaming. I was afraid something might have happened to Oikoa. I sit up on the edge of my bed and turn my sight to a terrified Oikoa. Is something wrong? I managed to mumble out in a tired, sleepy voice. Sorry. I didn't mean to wake you. He apologized after a long pause. What happened? Are you all right? I asked, scanning him. I'm fine. It's just, I often get night terrors. He informed me, sounding a little sad. I should have told you beforehand, sorry. Duh. Do you have any way to deal with them, or do you just accept them? I questioned, placing my head up with a fist. I usually just let them happen. He replied quietly. When I was younger, my mum used to stay with me until I fell asleep. Every time I would sleep like a log. I guess having someone I can trust near me puts my mind at ease. I don't really know. If that's true, that could explain why it didn't happen yesterday. Though I don't know if he feels safe enough around me for that to be the case. I have a suggestion. It's a long shot, but it might work. He popped his gaze up to me, and for some reason, at that moment something in my stomach felt light. Why don't you sleep next to me? I propose, patting the spot next to me. He looked very unsure, which meant he was probably uncomfortable with the idea. Are you sure? He asks, sounding very surprised. I mean, only if you want to. I shrugged before getting back in bed. He stood from his bed and slowly trotted over to my bed. He still looked a little shaken from earlier. I'll try it, he said, again in a quiet voice. I lifted the cover with one arm, making an entrance for him. He crawled in next to me, curling up with his pillow. I figured he wasn't too keen on the idea. Some time passed and he seemed to have gotten comfortable. He was knocked out in a matter of minutes. I watched him for a while. He looked peaceful, just like he did when he fell asleep on that hill. I unknowingly fell asleep while watching Oikoa. The heat generating from his small body felt really relaxing, so I guess it made it easier to fall asleep. I was first to wake in the morning. I noticed that sometime during the night Oikoa shifted closer to me. His back now pressed up against my body. I had one arm placed across his stomach and he had his hand on mine. It felt amazing having him this close. I don't know why, but it feels really good being around him. I found that odd since he's a guy, and I haven't ever had to question my sexuality. I know I'm attracted to girls, and the thought of being with one of my guy friends disgusts me. For some reason though, it's different with Oikoa. I feel something for him. I don't know what it is, but it isn't something I've felt before. I wanted to stay in that position all day but he eventually woke up. He removed his hand from my arm to rub his eyes. When he realized how close we were he leapt off the bed. I caught him just before he fell to the floor. His reddened face now inches from mine. I have to admit, he had the most adorable look on his face. I would have pinched his face, but I didn't want to make him any more uncomfortable than he already was. I pulled him up onto the center of the bed, safe from the edge. He froze. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. He apologized, looking down at his lap. It doesn't matter. It seemed a little pressure had been released from his shoulders. He became less tense. Hang on, I'll go get us something to eat, I say before heading off into the kitchen. When I woke up I found myself pressed up against Iwaizumi. I jumped miles out of bed, almost hitting my head against the wooden floor, continuing to embarrass myself. Iwaizumi wrapped an arm around my back just before I fell backwards. Our faces were suddenly inches apart. I could hear my heartbeat, and I'm sure my face made it all too obvious that I was beyond flustered. Iwaizumi pulled me away from the edge and I froze, not wanting to cause any more unnecessary trouble. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I apologize for sleeping so close to him and making such a scene. I bet I creeped him out. It doesn't matter, he said, sounding almost as if it were true. I was able to loosen up a bit though. Hang on, I'll go get us something to eat, he said before getting out of bed and taking to the kitchen. My mind was still flushed with embarrassment. I can't believe I got so close to him. I'm starting to feel I haven't changed a bit since I was a kid. Whenever I slept with someone I would always reposition myself next to them, still asleep. It's almost as if my body migrates to the nearest heat source. My mind kept going in circles and before I knew it Iwaizumi had already returned, with 2 bowls in his hands. I brought you a bowl of cereal. Hope that's okay? He said, handing me a bowl. Why yeah, it is, thank you. I responded surprised. I was still taken back by his generosity. I worry that I may be fooled again, so I'm always on edge. He just seems genuine though. Iwaizumi took a seat on his bed and pulled out his phone. He focused on it while occasionally taking bites of his cereal. I realized I was still in his bed and removed myself as fast as possible. Iwaizumi glanced at me a little strange, probably for my jumpy behavior. I stood awkwardly in the center of the room for a moment before getting on my bed. The door to the cabin suddenly opened and an instructor walked in. The hiking trip starts at 12. If you're coming, make sure to meet in the middle of the park, he announced, leaving moments later. So, are you going? Iwaizumi asked, looking my way. I made up my mind about that last night. I'm down for it if I can be near Iwaizumi. Yeah. I'm going, preferably with you. I turned my statement into a question. My heart shook like an earthquake when Iwaizumi gave me a toothy grin. Sure. That'll be fine, he said, now smiling. That was a sign to me that he meant it. I couldn't help but return a smile after receiving his response. I took our bowls to the kitchen and washed them after heavily insisting to Iwaizumi. He's already done a lot for me. This is little favor wept in comparison to the things he's done. I sat in my bed reading for some time and decided it would be a good idea to get to the center of the park early. Iwaizumi agreed and we got our stuff and headed for the group. The walk there was quite peaceful. I really enjoyed walking around with Iwaizumi. It's a complete change from back home. I don't have anyone and my neighborhood stirs up some pretty ugly memories. When we arrived at the center of the park I spotted the guy from the day we arrived. Hey, you're that guy who fell asleep on the bus, right? He spoke mockingly. Yeah. I sigh out. Thanks again for the help you gave me. I say, giving a weak smile. No problem. I never did get your name. He said, curiously. Oh, right. I'm Oikoa Toru. I introduced myself. It totally crossed my mind. I meant to introduce myself earlier, but had my mind off somewhere in a distant land. Sounds dorky. He stated simply, with a smirk apparent. Right? I pouted at him a little. He chuckled in turn. My name is Ryota Shoke, nice to meet you. Shoke smiled and extended a hand. I gratefully shook it. So, I see you're going on the hiking trip. I guess you did need that extra credit after all. He said, nudging his arm towards me. I'm actually going for the sights. Extra credit wouldn't hurt though. I admit, giving him a subtle, sly smile. We ended up spending the rest of the remaining time chatting with Shoke. He's the kind of kid to strive for perfect A's in school. He seems pretty outgoing. Shoke went ahead on the trail while me and Iwaizumi waited a while. We preferred not being around the other students so that we could admire the scenery in peace. After everyone was quite a distance away, we began the hiking trip. Walking down the first path was already a breathtaking experience. The plant life there was so diverse. I was in awe, like an excited little child. I couldn't contain my excitement when we entered a dense forest. There were so many things that caught my eye, especially the bunnies that sat next to a nearby tree. I think I released a slight gasp cause I heard Iwaizumi chuckle. You seem very excited. He said, smirking at me. Yeah, sorry, it's just I love animals. I correct myself. With the way I'm feeling currently there was no denying my feelings towards animals. I guess you could have used this trick more than me. Iwaizumi said, shrugging, with a smile apparent on his face. I returned to his side after straying off path a bit. We made sure to keep the trail guide within sight so that we wouldn't get lost on the path. You must really like animals if they get you to come out of your shell that much. I've never seen you this lively. Iwaizumi said, looking down at me. I could feel the heat spreading through my body, for two different reasons. One being embarrassment, and I'm sure you can guess the other. Why yeah, I guess they are one of the few things that hold good memories from my childhood. I mumble, looking down at the path. After many glorious sights and exciting moments we reach the end of the trail. I can honestly say that this has been one of the best moments I've had in a long time. I'm sure just my mood would give it away. It also made me happy to see Iwaizumi smiling the whole time. It was a good feeling knowing I didn't bore him. As we headed down the trail back to the camp, or park rather, we ran into some of my old buddies. Hey, kid, you got any money? Me and my guys here want to go into town and have a good time. One, Durand, said, gesturing to his friends. Of course that was the first thing he started with. He was the same guy I spent all that money on, just to be by his side. What a good way to ruin my day. I already said I'm done paying for your stuff. I replied dully. Huh? You still owe us. He responded, getting a little heated. Is he serious? If anything I think you have it backwards. I decided to retort smugly. Which probably wasn't the best choice. Iwaizumi was watching throughout the whole conversation, probably not having a clue as to what was going on. Big mistake. Best way to get money out of a money bag is to beat it, right guys? He said looking back to his friends. They grew devious smirks. Crap, I wouldn't have responded the way I did if I knew they were going to be so hostile. I don't remember them being this extreme. I guess now that they know I have money they'll try to get as much as they can out of me. So much for not being a target. They definitely had me worried. I didn't need any more beatings on top of what I was already receiving from my father. They lifted stones off the ground and played with them a bit, only to chuck them my way seconds later. My legs wouldn't move. I couldn't run. Just like the times when I spotted my father making his way over to me. They began connecting with my soft skin, easily bruising it. I was frightened. Why? Why did it have to be today? Why them? Will my life always be this cruel? Before I knew it I was wrapped in Iwaizumi's arms. He protected me from the oncoming sharp stones. I can only imagine what they would do to me. I felt helpless and awful, having Iwaizumi save me. He must be in so much pain. It always upset me greatly to see someone getting hurt for my sake. Oikoa looked frightened standing there, so I started to assume they were trouble. Before I could tell them off they were throwing stones at Oikoa. The poor guy looked too weak and helpless to move. I ran over to guard him as fast as I could. He was already bruised a little by the time I reached him. The sharp stones flying my way really hurt, but for some reason I was dead set on keeping Oikoa safe. "Piss off, you jerks!" I yelled through the barrage of stones. They paused a moment, narrowing their eyes. "Why is someone like you helping a bitch like him?" one of the guys asked after identifying me. "The only bitches I see around here are you three," I retort, sending a glare of 1,000 suns their way. "PFFT, let's go," the guy said to the others, nudging his head towards the path. A few seconds later I released Oikoa from my protective grip. He still looked scared, and a little sad. "Are you all right?" I asked, checking his arms for bruises. To my dismay he had a couple. His bottom lip was also busted. I'm sorry. I should have kept my mouth shut." He choked up. I placed a hand on his shoulder to calm him. "This isn't your fault. Those bastards probably would have done it anyway." I helped him off the ground and supported him down the path to the park. He stayed silent the whole time, looking upset. The damage I'd taken from those stones was bad enough to where I had to go see a nurse. When me and Oikoa got to the office she was nowhere to be found. "Are you kidding me? Can't anyone ever do their job right?" I snapped, making Oikoa worried. "Sorry, let's just go back to the cabin," I sighed, walking out the door. Oikoa was able to walk on his own now, so I was a little ahead of him. This day was going well until those pricks showed up. The look on Oikoa's face when we were in the forest was something I never thought was possible. It was like he had been animated. His eyes lit up when we saw that deer near the exit of the forest. The time when he spotted those bunnies, he looked so cute. I don't know, there was just something about him that made my stomach feel light and tingly. Like I mentioned before, the feelings I have towards him are unusual for me. When we got back to the cabin the first thing I did was look for the first aid kit. During my tour of the cabin on our first day here I saw one under the kitchen sink. Thankfully it hadn't moved. I lifted it and brought it back to the bedroom. I opened the kit and realized I had no idea what half of these things did. After a while I shut it and stuffed it under my bed, planning to use it later. Now was a good time to take a shower. It's starting to get late and I still need to wash all the blood off my back before applying any bandages. With that I headed off to the bathroom and stripped for the shower. It took a little longer than usual due to the blood and bruises. I got out and dressed myself. I left my shirt off, cause it would make the bandaging easier. When I got back to the room a surprise was waiting for me. I brought you dinner." Oikoa spoke in a gentle and quiet tone. I hope that's okay," he added, sounding a little more anxious. A smile sprouted on my face before replying to him. "Thanks, this is really helpful. I didn't want to have to go to the buffet feeling like this. I'm really sorry." He apologized again. I didn't blame him for any of what happened, not even in the slightest. I gave him a reassuring smile before looking through the contents of the paper bag. There are 2 turkey sandwiches, a box of noodles, and a bottle of soda. He informed me as I scanned the items. Last time I checked, the bottled drinks weren't free, which meant he spent money on me. I felt a little bad, but I guess this was his way of apologizing. I also noticed that throughout this whole time he avoided laying eyes on me. He said it didn't make him uncomfortable, so I guess he's just shy, maybe? Oikoa told me he was off to take a quick shower. I lent him another one of my towels cause it seems they still hadn't gotten any new ones in. I didn't mind letting him use them as much as I initially thought I would. It actually sorta makes me happy knowing he's benefiting from it. I have a shit ton back home, so this is hardly a problem. While Oikoa was off showering, I scanned over the items that laid in the first aid kit. I didn't know where to start. I wasn't sure whether to slap bandages on or not. My coach's assistant usually does all of the bandaging, and I never really paid much attention to it. After some time I just decided to read the labels. They were all long and boring, and me being the person that I am couldn't be bothered with it. Before I knew it, Oikoa was already out of the shower. I was having quite a bit of trouble with this first aid kit, so I decided to ask him if he knew what on earth all this shit did. Do you know anything about first aid? I asked, looking up to him as he walked over towards his bed. Why yeah, a little. He replied, looking down at the ground. Good, give me a hand with this. I demand, plopping the kit onto my bed. Oikoa slowly crept over towards me. His usual pale cheeks were now flushed with a bright pink. Dang, he must really be shy. This should be entertaining at least. He crawled onto my bed and got behind me like I intended. He held his mouth in surprise when he saw my back. All right, what's the first step to all of this? I gestured to the kit sitting next to us. Duh. Well, with cuts and bruises like this, it would be best to rub some aloe on it. He answered, taking out a white packet and holding it to me. All right, get to it. I'm starving. I smirk at him, then take out my dinner. Wait. You really want me to rub this on you? He asked, getting quieter with every word. I nodded and pulled out a sandwich. He hesitated for a while, but finally came around. He was being as gentle as possible. Don't hold back. I can handle it. It took a long stare to get him to listen. I returned my gaze to the sandwich and took a bite. He slightly increased in both speed and pressure. I winced in pain as his fingers brushed over an open cut. Sorry. He apologized, checking to see if I was okay. Don't worry. As I said before, don't hold back. It was pretty smooth sailing from there. His hands were warm and soft as they drifted across my back. His touch was so sensual. The gel he was rubbing practically melted on my back. He continued while I ate the dinner he brought me. After a while of melding the gel with my back, his hands traveled to my sides, moving slowly, then up to my shoulders. He continued working his hands, massaging me. I threw my head forward in pleasure. I didn't even realize how much tensity I built up. It's been a while since I've had a massage, and I can easily say this is the best I've received. I felt like I was melting. The way he worked his hands was incredible. I most certainly didn't expect this from the shy and quiet Oikoa. He eventually slowed down, so I figured he was getting tired. Thanks, Koa, I said, turning to him. He reddened and kept quiet. I'm off to brush my teeth. Make yourself comfortable. He looked like he was ready to pass out right then and there. I'm sleeping on your bed again? He asks, with worry present. Only if you want to. I shrug. It would be better for both of us though. I tease before heading to the small bathroom. And sure enough, when I came back, he was knocked out, curled up in a little ball on my bed. I had this burning feeling to just get in and hold him. But that didn't seem like a very sensible thing to do. I shut off the lights and crawled in next to him. The little heat generator was already making me sleepy. The moonlight that peeked through the windows crept up onto my bed. Oikoa looked so peaceful sleeping in the night's blue light. I watched him a while, only to notice something horrifying. The bracelets and silly alien bands lowered on his arm, revealing some gruesome-looking cuts at his wrist.